Hey, everyone, it's Isaya. Welcome, welcome. Just give me a minute to get rid of this thing here. There we are. Welcome, welcome. This is Things Women Don't Talk About, one of my series in my podcast. So it's the series where I have a guest. And this is an episode especially dear to my heart. So, Things Women Don't Talk About is a podcast, is a series around things women don't talk about. So, it can be either things that are too mundane for discussion on the interwebs, like bathrooms. I've actually had a conversation around bathrooms. Or it can be things that are taboo, that are too dangerous, or that we seldom discuss in public. And we've had conversations about death, and we've had conversations about difficult topics, sex. Ooh, not on Facebook, uh, and things like that. So, and I'm trying very successfully, I must say, to invite amazing guests who are okay with discussing around these amazing, a little sometimes a little taboo subjects. If you don't know me, I'm Isaya from isayabell.com, and you can find me everywhere at Isayabell. And tonight, I am very, very happy to welcome Jennifer Elizabeth Moore as my guest. Hi, Jennifer. I was going to call you Elizabeth for
Hi,
some reason.
Isaiah.
um,
You would not be the first. You would not be the first.
so, it so happens that we actually don't know each other very much, although we have been in similar circles for a long
Yes,
time.
circling the same
And
places.
so
Yeah.
that maybe excuses my mistake of your first name. So,
Mm.
Jennifer is the author of a multi award winning Amazon bestseller called Empathic Mastery. She's the founder and head mistress of the Empathic Mastery Academy and Fairy Godmother Apprenticeship Program. She's the host of the Empathic Mastery Show podcast, where you might be listening to this episode as well, because we are sharing here.
Yes.
Elizabeth, sorry, again.
You can call me Jen. That's what everybody
Jen.
calls me,
Yeah.
except for my nephews. They call me Jenny.
Okay, I'll go for Jen then, because I'm not your
Yeah.
niece.
Yeah,
She's a
exactly.
master trainer for EFT International and a mentor and healer for other highly sensitive, empathic women. She was magical and intuitive from the get go, and she experienced her first prophetic dream when she was 9, and she has been navigating her extrasensory awareness ever since. She, in life, is supporting intuitives, light workers, and creatives to use their abilities for good, and that is her greatest passion. Isn't that a great passion altogether? So, our topics tonight is a very seasonal one. It seems like, it's the season of the witch. We always seem to be talking about witches in October. And although I published a blog episode a couple of weeks ago saying it's not Samhain yet, but now it's starting to smell a little bit like it. So
Yeah.
tonight we are discussing the witch wound. And we decided to go for a pun and call the episode Witch Wound, You're Being Hysterical, which, just in case you don't know, hysterical comes from the Greek word hystero, which means uterus, right?
Yes.
So only women can be hysterical. So obviously, and our conversation, of course, is going to touch on the witch wound in general, but we wanted to insist on the dismissive way it is considered by muggles and often reduced to a feminine manifestation of craziness or hysteria. So, welcome, Jen. Jen, why do I do this? Because I'm reading, actually. So, welcome, Jen. I'm really honored that you agreed to do this podcast episode with me. And yeah, what?
Yeah.
How are we going to start this?
Well, let's talk about, I guess I'd love to start by just talking about the definition, or at least the way I
Yeah.
regard the witch wound. Because, this is a term that's getting thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And I started becoming aware of the term, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It really started to come into kind of like common parlance. But I know for myself that I experienced the manifestation of the witch wound from the time I was born. I came into this life with an incredible sense of fear, an incredible sense of dread, a sense of like terror, fear, terrible fear of fire, like a terrible fear of fire, and that, like our house would get burned to the ground.
Mhm.
Um, but also this sense of fear of crowds, fear of strangers, fear of being too authentic or too true or too real, being fear that I was too weird, that I was too different, that I was strange. And it showed up with like trying really hard to mask and fit in, trying really hard to like just go along to get along and to not take too many risks. But simultaneously, I was incredibly fascinated with magic. I wanted to read everything I could about the supernatural, about the paranormal, about extrasensory perception, about witches.
Yeah.
And I identified as a witch and pretended to be a witch from the time I was playing dress up at like 3, 4, 5 years old. I knew I was a witch. So I was both feeling that sense of that like life force energy of
Mhm.
my passion of who I was, like the sap running through my veins, that this is what I am, and simultaneously this oppressive, limiting fear that if
Mhm.
I allowed myself to be who I really am, I would be annihilated.
Yeah.
And I think the witch wound is not just about the persecution of women as and children as witches in Europe.
Mm.
It's also a wound that comes up for any heretic, for anybody who takes the risk of speaking out, for anybody who is standing up and saying, the way that you're doing this is not right,
Yeah.
as well as for anybody who has followed their bliss, who is breaking away from societal patterns.
From
But
the accepted norm.
right, and the accepted norm. But I think the thing about the witch wound is that it also implies either ancestral trauma or reincarnational
Yeah.
trauma, like karmic trauma, that we've lived through something where this bad thing either happened to one of our ancestors or many of our ancestors, and or we have memory and a
Yeah.
sense of maybe not a conscious memory, but a visceral sense of memory in our body of what it was like to be shut down for being different,
Yeah.
and for being magical.
And
Yeah.
for daring to imagine that this was a way of living,
Yeah.
that was the way that I was going to live, and even maybe make money out of it, kind of make a living, not make money, become a millionaire, but make money as in, this was the way that I was going to earn a living by helping women give birth, by using the herbs and the plants, by, being this healer. And
Yeah.
this was dangerous.
It was dangerous.
And so I'm in Europe. I'm based in Europe, and although I'm from various places in Europe, I'm mostly from Switzerland and Greece.
Mhm.
And I happened to visit an exhibition a few years back, and I actually found the name and trace of the trial of my ancestor, who was not burnt, but drowned for witchery,
Mm,
for witchcraft. So
mhm.
kind of it was really, and I've got goosebumps just when I mentioned that. It was like, okay, so we're not talking kind of woo woo craziness. We're talking, this is my ancestor, and I know she's got the same name as me. It's like very obvious. And she's from the village nearby where my father was born. So it's kind of very, very obvious.
Yeah.
And she was literally drowned for witchcraft. And I saw the archives of the trial because these people had no shame at all. They actually kept trace of everything. So, and that made me realize that, it's not something that is crazy. It's literally not crazy at all. It's
Yeah.
facts. Um, we
Well,
have
and
literal archives that prove that, and even if it's not your ancestor, just living in a village where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 women were burned, hanged, or whatever, means that your children and you will inherit the fear.
Inherit the fear. Well, and this is a pattern that humans have been doing for thousands of years, is this scourging of the outsider, the scourging of the outlier, the scourging of the person who speaks up is a very effective way for human beings to stop uh, the voices of dissent
Yeah.
from speaking up, from saying things. And it's also like it's out of like the perpetrator's handbook to blame the victim, to gaslight us and to say, you're crazy, you're making shit up, this isn't a big deal, why are you getting so bent about this, it's not that big a deal, when we're talking like this is an atrocity that happened to
But the numbers,
millions of
yeah,
women and
we have
children.
to kind of state back the numbers. I like the math for that.
Yeah,
It's 9 million persons, right? 9 million persons in Europe, and I'm not talking
in
about
Europe, 9 million.
million over the course of 4 centuries. And it is not, and needs a reminder as well, it is not in the Middle Ages, it's not in the Dark Ages. It was while the Renaissance was happening, while supposedly we were opening to being more cultural and, learning all these things about Greek ancient history and traveling to Italy. And at the same time, burning, killing women mostly, but also some men and some
Yeah,
children
yeah,
on behalf of them just not being normal.
right,
Uh,
right. Or
and at the same time using their services. Because
right,
that thing, these
right. Still being like, yeah, I mean, it's like you go to church on, you went to you went to the whorehouse on Saturday night and then went to church on Sunday condemning the
exactly.
whore.
Yeah.
And, there's also the whole thing of the land grab and the resources, because
Yeah.
that was another thing.
Absolutely.
And especially here, I live in Maine, in the United States, which is the state, is like there's New Hampshire between me and Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is where Salem, Massachusetts
Hmm.
exists, which is the one place in the United States that is known
Yeah.
for witch trials. My understanding is there were plenty of other places, even in the United States, where
Absolutely.
women were accused of witchcraft or people were accused of witchcraft and were persecuted. But for some reason, Salem is the place that gets all the credit. And the thing is that there was so much politics involved in it. There was so much like, oh, this person has a resource that we want, we're going to accuse them of witchcraft and we're going to grab the land.
Yeah.
And which, interestingly, when I was in seminary, because I have a master's degree in psychology and religion from the oldest Protestant seminary in the United States, as a witch at the oldest Protestant seminary in the United States. And one of the things I was really struck by was like even reading or looking at sort of like the history of like biblical history and human history is like pretty much all the time we as human beings have done this thing where we've basically said, I'm entitled to take your resources because God told me that I'm better than you and
Yeah.
that I'm the chosen one and I'm the special one,
Yeah.
and you're the wrong one, and therefore I can harm you, I can kill you, I can do whatever, and I can take your resources. And I'm
Absolutely.
struck by how so frequently conflicts again and again and again ultimately come from the belief that there isn't enough to go around, and and sort of
Mm-hmm.
our vulnerability to scarcity. But the gaslighting that
Yeah.
happens, as you were saying, it's
Yeah,
like
the idea is that, in Europe it's very well known that in villages the local witch was the healer, was she was
right,
helping out everyone, give birth and heal from anything. And then we have the invention of medicine, which means, this is the
competition,
man's thing, competition.
right,
So let
right,
me get, plus, as you were saying, the land was a big thing,
yeah, big
because
thing.
it's so much, a resource that could be used by somebody else. So basically, two reasons to get rid of that person.
And the ancestors as well. Ancestor worship is something that we've been doing as a species probably since we were since the first
Yeah.
parent
Mhm.
died, or the first child died, or the first beloved died. We've been talking to our dead. And the thing is that when monotheism came in, ancestor worship and communication with our ancestors was one of the greatest. It's like it was a direct competitor to the guy in the sky. And so that's another part of it
I think
is
from the instant that you
Yeah.
decide that the only communication possible with the divine is through this one channel,
Right.
and you can't communicate with either your ancestors or the divine but through this one channel,
One channel.
and that means, going to church basically.
Right.
Obviously all the other channels become dangerous, and if they can be eliminated, then I gain more power, and
Yes.
that's simple. The crazy thing for me is that not only did this happen, but that now, today, 2023, there's people still saying, "Oh, come on, you're being hysterical talking about the witch wound. Aren't you exaggerating that?" And I just tested this theory because I happen to have a husband, and my eldest son is at home for now, so he's 27, and I talked about the witch wound this lunchtime, saying we're going to have this conversation with my friend Jen, blah blah blah. And both of them had this look on their face, and I love them to bits, but both of them had this look on their face that was like, "Are you sure?" It was like, and they are supposed to be enlightened. I'm freaking living with those guys. One of them is my son. I birthed him, and still there's this almost disbelief on the
Yes.
seriousness of this.
Well,
Um,
and
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 at
then
the
you
same, and obviously when we decide that we do something, then life kind of gives it, the divine works with us. So this morning I was in a mastermind with a couple of my female friends, and one of them was struggling very much with selling in her business, and I said, "This is the witch wound."
it
And she
is
looked
the
at me
witch wound.
like, cling, and I saw the light kind of in her eyes. It's like, literally, it's killing us now.
It is killing us now.
Mm.
Well, and I had this realization. I was talking with somebody very dear in my world whose mother is an evangelical, and and this friend of mine is decolonizing herself from evangelical Christianity, like Southern American
Ooh,
Christianity,
tough.
which is its own flavor.
Yeah.
And her mother's a very magical woman and drawn to a lot of magic, but is also extremely terrified of magic. And I suddenly had this incredible flash that the reason that this woman went so far to the right and went so far into her experience and doubled down on being an evangelical, like born again Christian, was because her witch wound is so unrecognized and
Yeah.
unresolved, and the trauma of her previous witch, because her daughter is a witch, and I've met this woman. She's definitely, like, she's magic. Like, you can smell the magic on her. But it's like the way that it's manifested for her is that she is an ultra conservative Christian.
Yeah. She's
And
kind of she's pulling
in
the extreme opposite.
she
Protect
ran
yourself.
towards the thing that she thought would make her safe, and so it's like fear of visibility is one of the ways that this manifests for us, fear of putting ourselves out there, fear of selling what we have because we're afraid we're not allowed to make money off of our magic, but also
Yeah,
sometimes
and it will
going in
become
the exact
more
opposite
visible.
direction.
If I
Yeah,
get paid, then it becomes very, very visible. If
right.
people are agree to pay me for my magic, and I agree that at the other end we have of the spectrum, we have women who kind of run the other direction and hide so deep, kind of camouflage, basically, into the extreme opposite of that. So become more normal than the norm, kind of, hiding
Exactly.
in
Yeah,
plain sight
lean
as.
all the way into
Mhm.
that other life. Yeah.
And weirdly enough, though, because you were talking about Christianity, I have my own versions, and I have two of them because my father was Swiss, so I have all the Protestant thing, and my mother is Greek, so I have all the Orthodox, Greek Orthodox stuff, which is different flavors. In general, the same shit. Sorry,
Yeah.
but different flavors. But what I know for a fact is that the people who in both those churches are the most prominent are the most magic. And it's the only way that they can give themselves permission to be magic, because they are magic inside. And in Greece, it's very. My grandmother was a witch. I'm absolutely sure she was a witch, but she was an absolute devotee Christian,
Mhm.
Orthodox. But she could be magic because she was protected there by the authority of the Christian church,
Right. Right.
which is, it's. it's laughable if it, if we laugh about that, or it's very, very sad because it, there is the most difficult thing, I guess. It's to just be bland, kind of beige, for which this is the most difficult thing. But I'm guessing that it's easier to kind of go all in crazy Christian, crazy magic Christian. That is safer than being crazy, crazy witch.
Yes. Well, I mean,
Um, but
crazy magic Christian, you are part of the majority, and what's interesting, when I was in seminary, I found that when I had really genuine conversations with I was at the oldest Protestant seminary in the country, and we had the 4th largest contingency of Unitarian Universalists, which is what I was raised as. And then we also had a very large population of American Baptists and Pentecostals.
mhm,
And so I had these amazing conversations with some of these people. And what I found was that, ironically, the Pentecostals, the flavor or the quality of the way they engaged with the Holy Spirit, is how they would talk about it, was so similar in the
mhm,
feeling of that communion with the divine that I had. But I always used to joke when I was in seminary that for them, it was like they'd look at me and they'd be like, I recognize something in you. But then they'd be like, but your Holy Spirit is contaminated, because
mhm.
there are such rules about it. And so it's always fascinating to me, these religions that create these very rigid constructs of, like, either you're in the camp or you're out, like these are the boundaries, these are the lines. And this idea of, if you comply, you can do all these things. But if you cross the line, then you're a pariah, you're
Yeah,
persona non
it's an
grata.
immediate no. There
Yeah.
is just one line there, and 1 foot over the line, and you're
Complete
done.
exile.
You're
Yeah,
done. Yeah.
yeah,
We've got Maureen watching, and she commented something that I think is very interesting. She said, exactly, being drawn to the mystery, yet hiding in plain sight, which is
exactly.
exactly, what so many of us have been kind of forced to do.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
the awakening is painful, I think. The for some of them, it's kind of because we are pretending here, both you and me, that Christianity is not a huge part of patriarchy, but it is. So the awakening sometimes is kind of painful, when
And
you
it's
realize that
scary.
to
It's
supposedly become safe, you actually put yourself as a woman in the hands of the patriarchy, and then have been
well,
shrunk.
well, and then it's like the idea that we're gonna be safer within it, the idea that we're gonna be safer within the patriarchal system is also this is there's so much gaslighting in that, because it's kind of like, yeah, you're going to be safer to be in a domestic violence relationship, you're going to be safer to be in a community, church community, where people
Depend on somebody else.
say, stand by your man no matter what. Oh, you just need to change your own behavior. um it's sort of like, we need to acknowledge that there's no safety for us as women
No, exactly.
within the patriarchy as it is right now.
No, but
It
that's
Yeah,
exactly the gaslighting that's been happening.
right,
Um,
right.
and I believe that for this makes me even sadder. I believe that for many generations, women have been gaslighting themselves into
Oh,
believing that this was
absolutely.
safety.
Exactly.
They
Stockholm syndrome too, you
exactly,
know?
exactly.
Yeah, we have and the way that we I mean, the way we and then there's a whole correlation, or I think the relationship between weight, body, and, age and weight, and the idea, the way we as women police ourselves and police each others about being attractive, cisgendered, white, young women who can attract a man in order to receive and be supported and held and taken care of. And
Hmm.
yet, I mean, it's like here in the United States, I believe the statistic is like 1 out of 2 marriages ends in first marriages end in divorce. And it's something even higher, like, I think, like it's something like it's an even higher percentage of something like 1.5, like, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was kind of like 1.5 out of 2 marriages end in divorce in the second, or in the second
Okay.
marriage. This idea that we're gonna get safety in the patriarchy is an illusion, and then we throw ourselves under the bus with, like, all of our energy, all of our time, all of our focus is on this idea of, like, I need to be thinner, I need to be prettier, I need to be, and the self-policing that goes on is just
Yeah,
crazy.
and in general, what the uh, I'm
Maureen
sorry.
just posted she lost sound on this
I'm really
event.
sorry. I'm really sorry if you did. I don't think I can do anything about that. You can listen to the replay on my podcast. That's
Yeah,
and hopefully the sound will be good there. Um, but the what I wanted to say is that in general, the position that women have had to take, and that they have, to my sadness, undertake way too much, is become smaller in all kinds of ways. So smaller physically, kind of, thinner, smaller,
yeah, yeah,
less visible. um, and then on top of that, become smaller as in less intelligent, less noisy, let's speak less, basically, mostly if it's clever speaking, or knowledge, you kind of shut up rather, be this supposedly blonde um, plant, basically,
yeah.
and
Barbie.
yeah, Barbie, exactly.
Yeah,
And to me, it's, you know that makes me every time sad, because it touches, if we start seeing that for what it is, which is a witch wound, or a manifestation of the witch wound, it means it touches every place in what is today um, handicapping women in every place. So in the workplace, in the business world, in relationships, everywhere, it's about women forcing themselves to be smaller, to be less visible, to be less of themselves,
yeah,
um, for fear of. But just wait a second, nobody's burning anyone anymore, or at least, thank heavens, not in the European slash US zone for now.
right.
And
Yeah, I mean,
every time
we're not being chased with pitchforks and, being burned in the middle of the
yeah,
town square anymore. You might get doxxed, you might get a troll on the internet,
yeah.
but
And
it's
and
not
and
what
I
it was.
do want to just acknowledge, touch a
Yeah.
minute or two on the fact that there are some places on earth today that women are
Yes.
being persecuted, and I'm really, really sorry for them. But
Yes.
this is not a good reason for us who are not in danger to shut up.
And this is
This,
this is
it should be the contrary. We should be screaming at the top of our lungs, because we have the possibility to do it
right.
without being killed or pursued with pitchforks.
Well, and I want to talk about trauma in the fact that whether we are talking about social trauma that we've witnessed and then sort of assimilated, inherited trauma coming from our ancestral lines of women who have been persecuted and killed, or karmic trauma where we were ourselves
Yeah,
killed for being witches and and have an instinctual memory of that. The challenge with all of that trauma is that until we address and heal it, it sits in our energy system and it affects us and
yeah,
it causes us to play small, but it also impacts the lens or the perception of our sense of safety in this life.
yeah,
So that even though you and I intellectually both are like, we are not in you're in Europe, I am in the United States, and we're both in places where we are safe to be witches without being annihilated for it. We might get some obnoxious comments on
yeah,
Facebook
of
from a
course.
troll, but we are not going to be like run into the center of the town square. But that traumatic memory
Yeah,
impacts us to the point where we feel fear about expressing our truth
yeah,
proportionate to the previous trauma, because the way that I understand trauma works is that wherever the traumatic event happens, it locks in and encapsulates into our system,
yeah.
and no memory,
Crystallizes.
it crystallizes, and no memory after that has the ability to play through. So for me, one of the things that has been remarkable has been actually doing past life regression
Yeah,
work, doing
I
past
agree.
life healing work, and going back to the moments of my deaths and going through my deaths and then going, wait a second, I'm still here. That it's like, yeah, you tried to kill me, but I'm still here. And
Yeah.
there's that meme that says, we are the granddaughters of the witches you burned. And my
Hmm.
meme version of it is, we are the witches you burned and we remember and
Hmm.
we're back.
I
And
agree.
this time we're like, yeah, no, you're
Hmm.
not allowed to continue. I mean, we've been in a cycle of violence for thousands and thousands of years as a way to keep people scared, oppressed, and quiet and playing small. And it's like the country, the planet has been overrun with bullies who are
I
using
agree.
violence. And violence is no longer unacceptable. It's no longer acceptable.
Yeah, I agree.
It's no longer, but as long as we fear for our mortal lives and fear allow violence to dictate what we do or do not do, we will continue to empower violence
Yeah,
to have control. It's
I
almost
agree.
like we have to sort of take, I don't know, like the gravity of violence is sort of this paradox of, on one hand it's like, yeah, they can annihilate us, but on another hand it's like, and there's something, it's time for this to stop.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And the only way it's going to stop is if we who feel this witch wound are going to do two things. First of all, we're going to address it. We're going to not put it under the rug and pretend that it doesn't exist or
Right.
that we'll make do for it. And when you see yourself, because you're clever women, all of you who are listening to us, I'm sure, when you see yourself playing it small, hiding, be afraid of selling, be afraid of owning who you are in a room, whether it's a room of friends or family or a business place. And when you see that in yourself, do something about it. Go and do the past life regression sessions. Go and do the healings, the light healings, the whatever healings do something about that. And the other thing that we're going to do is, if ever somebody today dares to say that we are being hysterical for talking about the witch wound, we are going to bark because this is not going down. No, we are not being hysterical. And even if we were, absolutely, again, I'm going to go for the Greek linguistics because, as you know, I'm Greek. So, of course, I'm being hysterical because it just means that I have a uterus. And guess what? I do. So, but, this is also the time when we should never agree anymore to just be okay with, oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh,
Oh,
you're exaggerating.
oh, you're
Oh,
exaggerating. Oh,
uh,
oh, it's over now. Get over it. Stop
yeah, get
worrying
over
about
it.
it.
Um,
And
nobody tells. I'm going to be very
yeah,
blunt because we're living this particular week. Nobody tells the people from in Israel, oh, get over the Shoah.
yeah,
And thank heavens nobody tells them because it's not a small thing. Well, we're talking about the same numbers here,
yeah, yeah.
same math. So please don't tell us to get over it.
Right, right. Well, and there is another really interesting thing about this, in the sense that trauma, unresolved trauma, really, it grows, it mutates the tree. It grows in really,
Yeah,
really weird ways. And if you think about the impact of the loss of, like, we white people, European people of European descent, lost our indigenous traditions. We lost our
yeah,
ancestor. We lost all of our grounding, our connection to the earth. We endured an incredible genocide and we endured an incredible annihilation for, as you said, 400 years. 9 million women, children, and men were killed, under the pretense of being, not fitting in, basically. And the thing is that that trauma is a can we have been kicking down the road
yeah,
for centuries now, that has manifested as our dissociation from our hearts, from our truth, and has caused us to then perpetuate the trauma forward with racism, with sexism,
Yeah.
with classism, with all of these different ways that our unresolved, unreconciled trauma is absolutely coming home to roost. There's a book that I really love that is called My Grandmother's Hands, that was written by a man named Resma Menachem. I can never, I always forget how to say his last name, but he talks about how, in order to transform the world, and his lens is all about transforming racism through through acknowledging our trauma and moving through it. And he speaks a bit about just the way that, the European traumas, the ordeals we endured, this is come home to roost. This is affecting us.
Yeah.
Another thing that I heard somebody say a while back, and I really noticed this, is I believe that one of the reasons why people are so still, other than, TikTok witches and the cute little sparkly hat, that people are still so often disinclined to claim witchcraft and claim, which is our European indigenous traditions, but go for like Buddhism, yoga, Native
Yeah.
American spirituality,
That's interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
is because we are so traumatized by the way that our own magical traditions were ripped away from us
Yeah.
that we will choose other, sort of like religion du jour that's kind of
Less dangerous, or
less
supposedly less
dangerous,
dangerous. Yeah.
more because it's not the one we were annihilated in. And
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to me how even like the fear of the word witch, the fear of the name witch, of the way in which, you know, we as people of European descent will try on all these other things and not embrace even shamanism,
Hmm.
where people are
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm into shamanism. And I'm like, but they won't own witchcraft. That
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
for me, it all comes back to unresolved trauma and the
Yeah. I
impact of
agree.
it.
I agree
Yeah.
that there is a part. It seems like, if we were to go for a metaphor, a body metaphor, it's like we have this unhealed abscess somewhere in our
Yes.
body,
The
and
witch
it's
wound.
rotting in there. Yeah, but literally, like, it's not for me, it's not a wound like an open wound. It's
No.
something that is hidden. We don't even know we're carrying it. That's the big thing, because when we kind of realize, then you open it, and then you can see it, and then you can heal it. But the
Right.
thing is,
Right.
it's there, it's in the dark again.
Yeah.
And it adds, it touches so many things. I also want because I see the time
Yeah.
going, and I just want to address one thing, which is about old age.
Mm.
And being 50 something myself, and in the middle of the craziest menopause ever, like,
It gets
like
better.
we do.
I'm 60. It gets better.
I know it's going to get better, but I think,
Yeah.
it's I think it's part of life, so I'm
Mhm.
fine with it. But I can see how, and I can feel how getting old and aging and deciding not to dye my hair, and and not to pretend that I'm 33 years old, is really complicated,
Yes.
for the world around me.
Yes.
And also, we were discussing that the other day with my family. Hollywood is not helping, because the
No.
age of women in the movie is like crazy. It's like, you never know. You got a teenager played by a 30-year-old, and then a granny played by a 52-year-old. So it's kind of, the whole situation
Preach.
is like,
Preach.
it's like, oh my God, who, what, So women have no image, like, because Hollywood is all over, and we all watch the movies and the TV shows. So we have no representation of what is an old woman, a normal, they're not completely redone old woman. And the only word that is acceptable with old is witch. So we have this old witch, or old hag, or,
Hag
you
or
know
crone.
and yeah, I'll take the crown thing. But, and there is a lot, of self-hatred in women,
Yes.
again, because we kind of feel that, I'm becoming this old witch hag person, and I can't stand it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm kind of pushing her to die, basically. So I'm killing this part of myself. And
Mm,
considering that I am absolutely convinced that we have four basic feminine archetypes, the crone is being one of the four, we just can't kill one part of ourselves. And that is the extreme extent of what the witch wound does to us, is we are led to kill parts of ourselves that are essential to our well-being, but also to our expressing in the world, and to any good that we can do in the world as well. Because that's the thing, if we believe that only maidens and mothers can do nice things in the world, and that enchantresses or menopause women and crones just have to die, this is so much knowledge, so much good in the world that will never be shared.
right. Right. Oh, and I mean, this is just a whole other episode about the youth culture and the fact that we are, well, and like it's that we are not respecting our elders, that we are not looking to the people who've been there and done that and have had the experience.
But I think
That's
it's very, if we discuss the Middle Ages, or the the witch hunts again, historic ones, the young doctors killed the old witches.
right,
That's the plan. So
right.
it's ageism, if you want, even then. And I think
Mm,
it's part of it. I'm not saying that the witch wound resumes to an age thing, but it does include that factor. I mean, you were saying, we have the young witches on TikTok with the glittery
right.
hats. Those are okay. You can even call them fairies, and that's even better.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we all have to start somewhere, and many of us started as baby witches at a certain point in
And that's
time.
beautiful.
And it's beautiful. What's sad to me, though, is that the wise woman, the elder woman's voice is so frequently not heard.
Yeah.
And I think this also goes into the way that commercialization and capitalism and empire and patriarchy has managed to manages to infiltrate nearly everything. And so spirituality, I think, has gone through a marketing phase, and now it seems to me like what I've noticed is that often it's not the person with the greatest magic and wisdom, it's the person who knows how to market themselves, who gets out into the world better. And it does not necessarily, it's like I personally would rather learn from somebody who has 20, 30, 40, 50 years of experience under their belt, as opposed to somebody who's like just took a course and thinks that and wants to go out
Hmm.
there. I'm thrilled that somebody's taking these courses and wants to go out there, but I do want to say that I think there's a really big difference between somebody who's like in the first 10 years of their journey as a
Hmm.
healer, as a teacher, as a spiritual guide, and somebody who has 20, 30, 40, 50 years of
Yeah,
experience and just showing up and being in the trenches and doing the work over and over and over again.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So we're going to end this with a positive note, because I'm always for the positive. And the positive is like this: please, ladies, stop hiding. This is now. This is the time that you get out of your caves, that you ride your broomsticks or whatever, you can drive, but get out in the light, because the light is the only healing thing,
The light
always
is
and
the only
forever.
healing thing.
And we need your light. The world needs everybody's light. Um, and hiding in the shadows will do you no good, and it will do the world no good either. So remember two things: heal, have a look at your wounds and heal them, and then don't take shit from no one.
Yeah.
No, you're not being hysterical. This thing is existing, but you don't have to keep on carrying it as much of you. You can also heal it and put it in the light.
Can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
Do we have time for one more comment?
Yeah, we
Awesome.
sure.
Fear is an illusion.
Mm,
Fear is an
agree.
illusion. And what I can tell you is that I have lived out as a magical person for most of my adult life. I have done things that I never dreamed, like that I was afraid, terrified I was going to get reproach. The fear of doing it is much worse than the
No, good.
reality of experiencing it. Fear is an illusion. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Most of the time, you are going to discover that your fears were unfounded and that your terror is coming from a previous life, an ancestral experience that's driving that bus. But when you actually do it, you're like, oh, that didn't kill me.
Yeah. So, if you like music, I'm going to end with this. There's a beautiful song called Highway Women, not Highway Women, that is sung by a group of women who call themselves the Highway Women. I think Kobe Cat is in there. And it's literally what we've been talking about for 3/4 of an hour. So go and listen to that song. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having this conversation. I had a blast. I did not see the time passing.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's do this again sometimes. We have more subjects, I'm sure. So
I'm
thanks
sure
very
we,
much.
yeah.
Wherever you're listening to us, you will find Jennifer's details above, below on the video or the audio. So go and check her out. If you have the luck to work with her, you will have the time of your life. And you might find out that, you know, carrying this witch wound in your arms is not a necessity and that you can heal. And I'm pretty sure Jen can give much help for that. Sending lots of love to Jen and to each and every one of you. Thanks for watching us live or listening to the replay, and bye for now.